The House Committee on Energy and Commerce has wrapped up a 3.5 hour long hearing on misinformation, basically in broadcast news. And it was called Fanning the Flames, Disinformation and Extremism in the Media. And there was a lot to see and hear, and a lot of ripe material for another video, which I'm planning to do once I have time to sift through more of the sound bites and put it together, maybe for my live stream this weekend. Today, though, we're going to focus on letters that were sent to, I guess you call them cable providers. It sounds a lot like the video that I did not too long ago regarding Brian Stelter of CNN's discussion with an interview guest about this exact issue of cable providers and their role in the spread of misinformation, and thereby should they be doing more to police the outlets like Fox, like Newsmax, like OAN. That was essentially their focus in Stelter's conversation and in these letters that I'm about to show you from two California representatives. Representative Jerry McInerney, California, also Representative Anna Eshoo, also a Democrat from California. They sent this letter to, this first one went to AT&T. The next one here is to Verizon Communications, also Roku. The next one, Amazon.com, to Jeff Bezos. Mr. Tim Cook at Apple. The next one is Comcast Corporation. After that, Charter Communications, Inc. Dish Network. And the next one, Cox Communications. Altus USA. Alphabet, Inc. And let's see, Hulu. And finally, I believe this is the last one. Oh, no, that was it. Hulu. Okay. So, again, I'm going to read this in its entirety. It's not super long. Same letter sent to these different organizations. And I think it's a couple pages, but it's good reading. So let's all settle in for a second. Okay. And then, you know what? You can decide. Well, this first one to AT&T, Mr. John Stankey. Our country's public discourse is plagued by misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, and lies. These phenomena undergird the radicalization of seditious individuals who committed acts of insurrection on January 6th, and it contributes to a growing distrust of public health measures necessary to crush the pandemic. We are concerned about the role AT&T plays in disseminating misinformation to millions of its Uverse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV subscribers, and we write to you today to request additional information about what actions AT&T is taking to address these issues. Nearly half of Americans get their news primarily from TV. However, not all TV news sources are the same. Some purported news outlets have long been misinformation rumor mills and conspiracy theory hotbeds that produce content that leads to real harm. Misinformation on TV has led to our current polluted information environment that radicalizes individuals to commit seditious acts and rejects public health best practices, among other issues, in our public discourse. Experts have noted that the right-wing media ecosystem is, quote, much more susceptible to disinformation, lies, and half-truths. Right-wing media outlets like Newsmax, One America News Network, and Fox News all aired misinformation about the November 2020 elections. For example, both Newsmax and OANN ran incendiary reports of false information following the elections and continued to support an angry and dangerous subculture that will continue to operate semi-openly. As a violent mob was breaching the doors of the Capitol, Newsmax's coverage called the scene a sort of romantic idea. Fox News, meanwhile, has spent years spewing misinformation about American politics. These same networks also have been key vectors of spreading misinformation related to the pandemic. A media watchdog found over 250 cases of COVID-19 misinformation on Fox News in just one 5-day period. An economist demonstrated that Fox News had a demonstrable impact on non-compliance with public health guidelines. One online platform suspended and demonetized OANN's channel online because it was spreading COVID-19 misinformation. Newsmax has amplified allegations that members of the Chinese Communist Party helped to develop the COVID-19 vaccine. Sadly, these facts are not new. One popular television show aired a segment about OANN last April that included a dire warning. The kind of misinformation OANN is spewing right now could end up getting people killed. Yet to our knowledge, the cable, satellite, and over-the-top companies that disseminate these media outlets to American viewers have done nothing in response to the misinformation aired by these outlets. AT&T currently carries Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN on UVerse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV. As a company that serves 17 million Americans, AT&T plays a major role in the spread of dangerous misinformation that enabled the insurrection of January 6th and hinders our public health response to the current pandemic. It is for these reasons we ask you to provide with us the responses to the following questions about AT&T's policies toward content carried on UVerse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV by March 8th, 2021. And here are their questions that they want answered, okay? What moral or ethical principles, including those related to journalistic integrity, violence, medical information, and public health, do you apply in deciding which channels to carry or when to take adverse actions against a channel? Do you require, through contracts or otherwise, that the channels you carry abide by any content guidelines? If so, please provide a copy of the guidelines. How many of your subscribers tuned into Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN on UVerse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV for each of the 4 weeks preceding the November 3rd, 2020 elections and the January 6th, 2021 attacks on the Capitol? Please specify the number of subscribers that tuned in to each channel. Number 4, what steps did you take prior to, on, and following the November 3rd, 2020 elections and the January 6th, 2021 attacks to monitor, respond to, and reduce the spread of disinformation, including encouragement or incitement of violence by channels your company disseminates to millions of Americans? Please describe each step that you took and when it was taken. Number 5, have you taken any adverse actions against a channel, including Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN, for using your platform to disseminate disinformation related directly or indirectly to the November 3rd, 2020 elections, the January 6th, 2021 Capitol insurrection, or COVID-19 misinformation? If yes, please describe each action, when it was taken, and the parties involved. Number 6, have you ever taken any actions against a channel for using your platform to disseminate any disinformation? If so, please describe each action and when it was taken. Are you planning to continue carrying Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN on UVerse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV both now and beyond any contract renewal date? If so, why? And then says most gratefully, and they signed. Representative Ashu's district is actually Silicon Valley, interestingly. So I don't know if there's a, hey, we've been going after tech companies for a while, so let's switch our attention now to TV providers, which are not at the heart of my district. Not totally sure. There was a question that came up in the hearing related to this, asking whether it is constitutional for government officials to essentially pressure private companies to suppress speech. The answer from the law professor who was testifying in this committee hearing is it's not unconstitutional. However, he called it an attack on free speech, and that it sets a precedent for just more pressure to, in the name of public safety, keep certain voices from being heard. Now, again, there was a lot of interesting material for good conversation and debate in this hearing, which I will address in a separate video. As for this one, I'm going to wrap it up and just say that it does ring a very similar bell as what I heard Brian Stelter saying on CNN himself. And it's interesting to see not just the government officials, but people who are given platforms on these broadcast channels that compete with Fox and OANN and Newsmax, saying, I don't know, maybe we should consider this, without realizing, how the encroachment on speech, even if you're going after somebody who you disagree with or who you even frankly think is spewing straight up lies, that from one broadcast news source, which has had its own issues with misinformation, to then say, we want to get rid of another news source that spreads misinformation. It's a little bit hypocritical, I think. And the real question that came up in the hearing especially in light of these letters that were sent, is why just these channels, for instance, why these specific news outlets, when we know that there is misinformation coming out of the entire gamut, and who then makes the decision about who's the most dangerous and who then should suffer the greatest restrictions, who ends up being the person that's going to decide that. And a very astute point that was brought up was that typically when people who are in charge make decisions about morality or voices that are challenging the acceptable thought, that sometimes history has shown us those voices are ridiculed as disinformation or dangerous information when really they're just ahead of their time. And so then once again, you bring up the question of who makes the decision about whether this is somebody saying something really important that we just don't want to hear, or somebody saying something that is going to lead the public astray. And it never seems to really find an answer because I think maybe deep down all these people already know that. I'm not totally sure. They already perhaps know that, you know, you're either going to leave the decision up to the government or to big corporations, and that neither have always had truth and the public's best interest at heart. There's always a possibility of corruption, power, money, whatnot. So I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think about this in the description. Love to hear your comments. And again, planning a video on the hearing at a later date. Don't forget to like, share, make sure you're subscribed, and I will see you next time.